All right, let's get started. Welcome back to the Nubo Synth Group. This is the first one since February 2020, so I especially thank you for being here, starting from zero momentum again. And for tonight, this is something I decided to put together, reconnect some different pieces for an EEG set where I can control an analog 4 with the electricity in my brain. So I'm using this EEG headband, and it will read my, turn the white noise down a little bit. It'll read my, so the white noise is when it's not getting a clean signal. So it's just noise from the atmosphere. So I'll be taking different frequencies in my brain. The lowest frequencies are delta waves, and then you move up into theta, alpha, which is kind of meditation state. And the frequencies, like delta is the lowest, and then you have theta, which is kind of a dream state. Alpha is meditation. They move up into beta, which people are in usually when conscious and moving about their day. High beta, you start to get into pretty stressed out states. So if you're really stressed out or cranking on coffee and zipping around your day, you're in high beta. And then above high beta is gamma, which is a state of joy or love or ecstasy or with the Buddhists, they do a love and kindness meditation to move up into gamma. And gamma is really related to alpha. So alpha is a foundation of meditation, and then gamma waves burst up and down on top of a foundation of alpha waves. So this is the exploration of music and synthesizers and also different mental and meditative states. So I'll be putting this on, and compositionally I'll be bringing in different tones, but my brain waves will always be going into, they get converted into MIDI and then go into the analog 4. And it's always improv, but it will not be like a 2-hour drone set, so it'll probably be 10 minutes. questions about what you saw or mapping to the analog 4, the EEG system?
I was curious about the visualizations, like the peaks and like different colors.
Yep. Trying to remember the exact mapping on this set. I have a lot of different builds. I believe the purple was delta waves, which is the lowest waves. Did you ever see yellow kind of peak up?
Yep.
Those were the gamma waves.
Yeah.
Let me think. So purple, red in this schema would have been theta, and then if there was a blue, for some reason it rendered on the screen that disconnected should be halfway through. So that's just an issue on my side with the projector. Was there a blue that popped up when my eyes were closed? Okay, that's alpha. And then moving up into the higher states was the yellow.
In the middle there's a kind of square line that kind of popped up occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
What color was it?
maybe the lighter colour?
Which color?
I think it was a lighter colour, maybe it was both of them. But it was just, instead of triangles.
It was a square wave? That might have been beta. Yep. Yes?
What parameter on was the MIDI being sent to on the analog? Is it algorithm or not?
It's the analog 4. It's a 4-channel synthesizer. And what I did was this particular mapping is quite intricate because I'm using, I really utilized all the oscillators that I could, because the noise channel, the white noise, is one track, so that one channel's gone right away. And with the other ones, on the low delta, let's see, I end up using macros. And so the CCs are changing different macros, which impact the different waves. The lowest wave, which was delta, has a type of pad, mid, grindy sound, and then also a sub sound. And those two oscillators were shaping the bottom, and that would have been shaped by my delta and a little bit alpha waves. And it's usually a balance between stress and relaxation shapes that wave. And then the top two, one was beta, which was the next one up, and the one above it was gamma. And again, using the oscillators as much as possible. And one of the things that's particular about this one is when gamma and beta when you're in a good place, gamma and beta can sync up and they swim together as a brainwave. And when they go off, I detune it. And so when they swim together, it was more in harmony. And then when they get more chaotic, I would change the tune on them to mirror that brainwave disharmony, by making it an actual disharmony in the upper sounds. And that was the high sound at the end. And then presentation-wise, this is something that I've developed in the course of this project. Originally, I would just put on the EEG and all the sounds are playing all at once. So I was at the peak of the song. So with this system and the later systems, I developed this one November of 2020. And with this particular one, I can fade in the individual sounds that are being impacted by the waves. And then a step after this, I created essentially a brainwave mixer where I can turn up and down. Essentially, I'm putting a limiter on individual brain waves coming into the system. So I can turn down my delta waves and see what the rest of my brain does. I can turn down my alpha waves and see what the rest of the brain does. And all that continually gets streamed as MIDI into whatever synthesizer I'm working with. And that was an important step for me to have some level of narrative rather than everything on all the ones right in the beginning. And that was inspired, it's interesting, you just hear these little things of how other people work, and then it's like, oh, I can do that. But it was, his name's Ben, is it Frost, who makes really noisy, heavy, dramatic, does that ring a bell? Someone had told me that he uses a real simple MIDI sliders to control the inputs on his channel. And so the full signal is going through all the time, and people who do modular are used to this. Most of the signal is coming out all the time, and the artistry of it is controlling the sliders of what signal is actually coming through the speakers. So this was inspired that type of setup, where internally all the signal is churning constantly, and then I'm using knob sliders to control what comes out.
I'm
Yeah.
curious sort of how your performance practice between sort of manipulating, sort of attenuating the sounds coming in versus sort of achieving the states that let you get certain sort of waves in practice balances. Because I was sitting here, I was listening, so like whenever something happens that's like because of your brainwaves, right? You're gonna hear that and respond as a performer. Right?
Yep.
So I'm sort of curious how you balance that in developing this
Yep.
practice, or sort of how that's worked, how you felt that out.
That phenomena of biofeedback is really important to me. People often ask, when you put this on, do you hear the output? And the answer is yes, and it's really important that I do. Because I choose the sound specifically to amplify certain brainwave states. So that gamma is a high, joyful sound, and the delta is a low, churning. Particularly with this headband, the delta spikes with muscular movement and stress, even though with more advanced EEGs, delta waves are more of a rest state. Delta waves, a quick aside, but delta waves are the waves that are dominant when we, from birth to like age 2 or so. And so it's really about survival. It's about the heart beating, breathing, all the organs working. And delta will react to have survival type of stimulus. And sometimes when performing, it feels like, not that I'm gonna die, but there's certain, certainly a stress performance. Can you remind me of your original question?
I think it was just sort of to talk.
Oh no, I remember now.
How you respond and sort of how that practice is developed.
Absolutely. Yeah, originally it was all biofeedback and steering everything without touching the gear, and I may go back to that at a certain point. Because when I do make muscular decisions to turn a knob, that does interfere with my brain state. It does break me out of completely internal focus. And that is something that I'm playing with in terms of what becomes the best performance and what becomes the best experience. Because there's been a few times where I've performed where maybe 20 minutes into it really achieve deep ecstatic states or deep meditative states that I can't achieve on my own without the biofeedback of the music and the EEG. And I haven't achieved that when doing muscular manipulations at the same time, so that is a disadvantage.
You find the same kind of thing with ambient sound, like we've got trucks going, going by on the road, like that this beta gets, when you beta,
It does, yeah, absolutely. So that's a part of, I consider that a part of the performance, that, I'm not up here hitting play on a WAV file, but that I want all the stresses of the present moment to impact me and then impact the music, just the way that, if someone honks outside, everyone's nervous system feels that, and then that gets reflected in a jump in the music.
Would that be a way to kind of do this collectively, to have everyone in the audience kind of contributing their brainwave and performing something out of that?
That is something that I'm eager to start researching. I applied for a grant to the Iowa Arts Council to start doing group EEG work. A Nubo synth group would be a great group of people to wrangle up and see if you'd want to put on EEGs and see what your brains are doing. So that is something.
David Rosenboom, the stuff he was doing in like the 80s comes to mind.
Who is that?
David Rosenboom, who ran the comp department at CalArts for a number of years.
Awesome. You've had your hand up.
Yeah, I think Mitch just said the idea that we could do something with some sort of finger trick where they slowly like acted it along with you and just try to see how that would manipulate the sounds that came out.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've also worked with motion sensors and dancers, so it can be interesting to use kinetics as well as a way to shape music and to augment movement with sound. With this particular EEG, I wasn't using, there's a PPG sensor on it as well that can grab my heart rate, and I've used that to set the tempo and techno sets.
Have you used it in any way where it's not like your brainwaves aren't focused on the performance, like they're involved in another task? Like
I've certainly done a lot of testing along those lines. You know, just put it on, started the music, and then did emails, phone calls, Zoom calls, like, you know, whatever, to see what my brain's. I've taken many naps with it, and that's always fascinating because as I'm drifting into sleep, there's this auditory reminder that I'm actually doing something, you know, that a part of me is connected to the real world, and I drift into these dreams, and then I hear a sound. I'm like, what's that sound? I'm like, oh, I have an EEG in my head, and my brain is triggering sounds. And it becomes this, instead of, you know, dropping completely into sleep, it becomes this anchor back to consciousness. It's almost like deep sea diving with, you know, whatever tube or rope or whatever they have to keep them, you know, connected to the surface. Welcome.
I was curious if you, I think it'd be really sweet to just like, almost one of those like a roll of the dice function, so you could like immediately like randomly change what parameters the brainwaves are controlling or something. I think that would be cool to be able to like, you know, I was kind of thinking like what if an arpeggiator rate is controlled by
Right.
brainwaves or something. So I don't know. I know like some software synths have like a little like dice button.
Yep.
That would be a cool thing to figure out maybe.
I worked with randomizing algorithms a bit from about 2000, 2014. And they can be very creative. They're great. And to be able to, and brainwaves themselves can be quite erratic.
Yeah.
So just mapping that directly into a sound can get a very, almost like instead of a sine wave, but the random wave.
Yeah.
They're very organic, they're very biomorphic in shape. It looks like, can look like a stock market ticker in a way, because it's the activity of, I don't know if it's millions or billions of neurons kind of surge. It's like a storm of electricity in our brains when we're thinking. And these particular EEGs that are external, you know, they don't go too deep into the head. It's like being outside of a stadium, and you can hear what the crowd is doing, but you can't hear individual conversations. And so it's grabbing the general sense and vibe of a performance, of what's inside the brain. Since a few folks have come in late, let's take a 5-minute break, and I will load up another performance with the EEG. So I'll need about 5 minutes to publish the app and make sure it works with, I'll just play it straight from Ableton. So 5-minute break.
Yeah, Ian's got a
Hey, really quick, I want to tell. No, not. I actually rather than yeah, we got these. We're trying to find an outside machine, and then we're like, well, we have lots of synthesizers,
I've got a few different kits, so I'll just go through them and try them out just for a couple minutes each, just so you can see how the brainwave data can be applied to different sets. All right, so what you're seeing here On this EEG, there's 4 sensors. There's one on the left ear, which is the lower left. There's one on the left forehead, which is upper left. There's one on the right forehead, which is upper right, and there's one by the right ear, which is the lower right. I didn't bring the MIDI dials, but I can mute and unmute them directly. So I took delta out and in. So delta is the red waves, that's the lowest waves. And you can see that they have different values based on where the sensor is on my head. The next is purple, that's theta waves. That's the 2 purple bars that I'm toggling. Next is alpha waves, which are those 3 bars, and that's around 8, 9, 10 hertz. And then the next few, this one's a low beta, it's also called sigma. It's that real light blue. And then mid beta is the lighter color, and then high beta is that several bars. So these together make up the beta waves, which are pretty broad. There we go. And then the high end are the gamma waves. And this is the most nuanced version of this system that I have, because it's grabbing individual frequency bins from each sensor, and my left brain, as those notes come up and down, they will trigger notes on the left side of the signal, and on the right side of the signal. If there's a boost in the back of my brain, I add more reverb, so it feels like it's coming from the back, whereas the front is a clearer signal. So I will try toggling some of these so we can hear. So that's a synth I chose for beta. The chart's reversed in that, when it's peaking, they're shooting down. That was just easier in terms of the graphics of using Swift. And what happens is when they hit a certain threshold, they'll trigger a note, and the higher ones will trigger higher notes, the higher frequency bars, and the lower frequency bars will trigger lower notes. Load up a different Ableton kit. This one's interesting in that it's all white noise, and the frequency of the white noise correlates directly with the frequency of the brainwave. eyes and I talk, you hear the higher frequencies, and then it gets bassier, more rumbly when I close my eyes and focus inward. So it's a very direct translation of the electricity in my brain. So a system like this is probably, it's one sound essentially, it's white noise and several frequencies. It's the easiest one to experience what the brain is doing in real time, and it felt, with my eyes closed and hearing the feedback in real time, it feels like surfing. I'm feeling things come up and I'm hitting these lows, and then, when I get to that real quiet period and my mind isn't like, is everything working? And, I'm in a room and there's people watching me, it gets the quiet, the highers quiet down, and just the lows get real prominent, particularly the blue bars, the alpha. And it's a real sweet spot to get there and just feel this like, and like, oh, I'm there. And then as soon as I say, oh, I'm there, it gets noisy again. So it's this really, it feels like I have a flashlight in my brain for the first time, and I'm able to kind of look around at how it's working and how the electricity is firing in real time with this type of biofeedback. All right. And this is an interesting one. I find that usually I work on electronic music, and for most people, they're like, what are these weird beeps and bloops and noise and distortion? So this is a kit using, it's a contact, and it's this really beautiful string set. And I think it's a real coherent way to illustrate what the brain is doing. And some noise. Are you sending, is that a cable? Some sort of interference. Alright. Audio engine is off. Let's go to extra microphones. Not seeing MIDI come in. Let's republish this. Reconnect. There we go. Discovered. This is what under the hood looks like. I stare at screens like this most of my days. go. Stream. I see. Volume is too loud. All right. So those are different ways. Those are different ways that I can take brain activity and point it towards different synth engines, instruments, and for me, different ones are more effective at biofeedback. Like that white noise one is really effective for me. I really feel like I'm moving around in a 3D room. And in the orchestra one, for someone who doesn't understand or like electronic music, something like that, they get right away. They're like, oh, the high strings are my highest brainwave frequencies, and that low legato bass string is, the lower delta waves. Any questions about these particular kits or this rendering that we saw here with the 4 quadrants?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Bonsoir.
I missed you.
I missed you too.
On October 8th. I missed
Oh,
you
the
in
premiere.
the
Yes.
street.
Yes, George was there.
I couldn't make it.
Yep.
But I heard about it. Right?
Yep.
It was great.
George was there. He had a great time, and he lamented you were absent.
I hope you do it again.
Yes,
Well-
we'll have a show in the spring
Oh, that's
in the alleyway. Yep.
perfect. So about the visualization, actually, and I was there when you performed at Trumpet Blossom.
Yep.
Trumpet Blossom. Okay. But I think visualization is good because you're helping the audience listen in a way, in a different way for sure. You're listening in a different way when you see. So I was thinking one thing that could be interesting, that I would be interested in seeing, because what we see is always the current state. It's like what's like right now, but we can't remember really everything what happened. But since music is really over time, I would be interested in seeing maybe a graphics of the overall blue, and I could see, oh, that's when there was more blue, and so kind of something that would go over time with more blue and less, and then maybe more red or less red.
Yeah.
But then even as a feedback, then when you explain what was going on, you could also
Refer back to it.
rewind and say, yeah, I felt that point. That's kind of what I would like to see.
Absolutely.
More programming.
It would be more programmed, but no, it's essentially what I'm picturing is that the beginning of the song, so you see the whole track of the song in a bar. So you see the live information, but you also see a timeline view,
Yeah, that's-
like in
yeah,
an
something
editor.
like that,
Yes, yes, that's great. Because in the past, I've done a snapshot of the past, like 2 or 3 seconds emanating out, similar to like an EKG, where you see
Yeah.
a few seconds of the beat. But the idea of doing longer form, where you can see the whole performance being
Yeah.
made in real time, it's like watching sheet music being written.
Kind of.
It's fantastic. Yes. Messy.
So it's like they're called spectrographs.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a good. So you can do it for any track of music, over time, and then by color, the frequency analysis. So,
And it's still within a box. It's not graphed out.
Yeah.
I should check that out. Yeah. It kind of leaves ghost images of where it's been.
Yes. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll have to send it to you.
Yeah, I would love to see that. Nick.
Have you tried kind of listening to the individual waves themselves? I'm not sure, instead of using them to trigger a note, I don't know how, probably more like phones. I'm
Yes.
not sure how sound-like they are, but, either kind of spewing it out into the audio range or
Mhm.
using an LFO to modulate something that you could then hear. So have you tried kind of listening into the waves, the individual waves by themselves?
More so, the first performance with the Analog 4 was using the waves to shape a sound, like an LFO, whereas this version, it can do both, where it triggers a note that is a similar frequency as the brain wave. But I can also grab the averages of those, which is what earlier versions are doing. It's that chart, but it's instead of 3 values for delta, or actually 12, 3, 3, 3, 3. It just averages them into one value, and that one value goes up and down. I think the initial thoughts with that is you could do it to a tune or a pitch, so you'd hear woo type of sound. Quickly, I moved on to having that open and close filters. And with alpha, I would invert it, because when people close their eyes and get to a restful state, alpha goes up. And that just makes sense for a low-pass filter to be dropping. So often I map alpha to a low-pass filter dropping, so it becomes dreamier and bassier. There's ways to...
And how sound-like are they?
They're quite organic.
Right.
Yeah, if you do see them over time.
Right.
They're not particularly... Yeah, they're quite organic. I'm thinking of, I can load up a version that shows the smoother waves. Perhaps at the end, I'll show you. But it can be, one of the things I did with previous versions in graphing is, instead of just going left or right like an EKG, I had them mirror out from the middle like a Rorschach. It was just more beautiful, but it was still the same data. So it's echoing out from the center. I switched over to a version of the first set where the waves were too low, but one of the ways in terms of creating performance art is I take the waves and project them onto my body, and it becomes this really Tron-like experience of having these waves in a pitch dark room where you just see these waves moving on my human form. And that was a mistake. I mean, I was at the I was doing a performance with this set in November of 2020 in Des Moines at a art show that was in a drive-in movie theater type screens, and people parked. And one of my concerns was I could project my brainwaves on the screens, but I didn't know if the people in the cars would understand that someone's sitting in the dark in front of them, because the headlights weren't on. They were just watching these 2 screens. And so I thought, I'll just take the projector and project on me, so at least they can see there's a form there. And is there internet here? If not, I have a hotspot.
Yeah, there is.
Can you log me into it? Go ahead. I'll show you the aesthetic and stuff. Just I think I can. And what that did was it finally allowed me to merge the data that was just being projected on screens behind me onto, just merge it with me as the performer. And so it's this really strong let's find, so the original one in Des Moines was here. So I projected the waves on me, and then my image was projected on the screens. And the part that was really ended up being fascinating for me, just as my goal was just so I could see myself. But at the end, or so they could see me. But at the end, when I move, there's something really Tron-like about movement. And when I saw that, again, it was just a practicality. I was like, oh, I need to keep doing that as a way to merge the data with me. And I cleaned up the lines and what's a good version? And then started doing some motion work. So it becomes really hypnotic. This was a set I did at CSPS in July. Is that the speaker? It got into really low frequencies. It was a set where, so the beat is my heartbeat is being set by a heart rate monitor, and then the synths are controlled by my brain. But it's a very futuristic, trippy, hypnotic aesthetic, more so than me just sitting with a projector behind me. And I'll show you what those look like. So the original performances were more along this line. This was CSPS in February 2020. So you see the waves emanating out of the middle like a Rorschach test. And that way you get a snapshot of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 10 seconds. But Jean-Francois, I love your idea of having it be in a longer form of like the whole set or the whole song. Yeah. So that's what I was doing prior to the projection. And they both have their advantage. I mean, it looks like a stock market. It looks like mountains. It looks like, it's very biomorphic type of data and shape. And you can get a sense of the movement of things. Any questions about that? Yes, Ian. Or anything.
So have you done this wearing headphones to hear what's happening while EEG is attached? If you have, I'm wondering what that's like. Or if it's feedback. Maybe that's actually bad in that case, or maybe it sounds cool. Have you tried that before?
I always hear it either in a sound system that's here. Headphones can be a little tricky because they pinch the EEG and can cause the signal to be not as strong. I am exploring developing headphones that has EEG in it, so you can just put it on and it's a combined device. But the situations where I have the EEG and the sound system is really loud helps me go into deeper and deeper states, particularly if it's loud enough where I can start to feel it on my body through the vibration of the sonic wave hitting me. when it gets to that point, my brain is really like, whoa, this is really heavy, that my brain is making a sound and that sound is impacting my body like a vibroacoustic
Right,
impact.
that's the thing I was thinking, like, if you have some really basic, really loud, limited headphones,
Yep.
to some, even if it's very small, to some degree, it's, you know, putting some other frequencies around your brain, the energy and all that, it's just a little different.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just curious if you would try that, and
Yeah, it's
if it did anything interesting, or if it was just kind of hearing it like normal.
it's very similar to the phenomenon synthesis of resonance. And so resonance is just finding a frequency and amplifying that frequency. That's what the biofeedback does with this system. So I am in a certain mental state and I hear a sound that reinforces that state, and it gets louder, and then I go deeper into that state, and then it gets louder and I go deeper into that state. It creates resonance, amplification at that frequency. It's a wonderful thing to experience. Yes, please.
You kind of just answered my question. Earlier, when you're explaining and it's running, and say you're doing multiple things at one time, and then you close your eyes and relax. So relax, and it changes. It gets more intense. Now, is the relaxing just focusing, or could you not relax and get super pissed, and it would go to a different place than if you calm
Yep.
yourself?
A lot of the creativity with it is taking this data that is coming in and choosing sounds that feel like that feeling. I don't think I've ever been really pissed off while composing with this.
Yeah, or
In-
just like go
in
to
the
a
gear.
darker place, which I mean, that's-
Certainly, yeah. The easiest thing to do is close my eyes and move into a meditative state, and those waves, I like that feeling of like diving down and things getting bassier, whereas someone else using this system may want to really get into like a beta focus and have that to be real crisp sounds or clear sounds or kind of mid-range synths that are like driving and enthusiastic or motivational. And that's just a creative decision of what to do with the MIDI that's coming in from the beta waves. And then the MIDI that's coming in from, the higher gamma waves. What does a gamma state feel like for me? And then choosing sounds that reinforce that state.
And of course, I don't think it's a good idea to just purposely create anxiety.
Sure.
Just like curiosity. It's like, how does that work? That's fascinating.
And there is subjectivity to it where like low bass sounds are very comforting to me. Whereas I was presenting this in Berlin, one of the people in the room, low bass sounds were scary to him. It felt ominous and dangerous. So there is some subjectivity of, as I'm wearing it, what sound reinforces what brain state. What is confusing is if I choose a sound, and this is one of the challenges with neurotherapy or neuromeditation, and I'm starting to consult with different groups that have technology, different companies that have technology to make better audio feedback for their systems, because right now a real basic neuromeditation feedback is if you get to a certain state, you're quieting down and you get to a state and you finally cross the threshold into a alpha meditation, you hear beep, and it takes you right out of it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the challenges is if the sound doesn't, and it still works, like people are like, oh, I'm getting to that place, but it's a jarring experience and it brings them back out of it. So choosing sounds that reinforce the state as opposed to conflict with it, because when it's conflicting, it just feels like hitting a pool of water with a bunch of splashes and it never gets a coherent, harmonious type of effect.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the performance aspect of like when you do a show. I've been seeing only one, but today I'm kind of seeing another one. And I think the one I saw was basically made of long pieces. Was it one long piece or was it maybe two? I don't remember exactly.
It was multiple. It was using an octatrack, and it had loops that were maybe 16 to 64 bar
Yeah.
loops, and my brainwaves were controlling the volume and the filter and the effects on those 4 tracks.
But in a way, I think it's also interesting to have the explanation you gave, like today. You know, like showing different kids. In a way, that's what technology gives us today. You know, like Alvin Lucier, he had one set of percussion instruments, right?
Yeah, he did.
And but so you have different sets. You can give different colors, and I think in complement as a complement to a long piece, it's also very interesting to see you kind of play your different instruments as a kind of like you did today, showing a snapshot. Another thing that I thought that I don't know if it's a good idea, so just forget about it if you don't want that. But
Sure.
It could be. My question is, how would that work? You know, but would that be possible to invite an audience member to experience? I don't know if how that would work. You know, but if you could give an audience member the experience for 5 minutes, and would that make sense? I don't know. Maybe not.
No, I have done that, and originally I was coming from a techno background, so I was gravitating towards how do I do longer sets that are mixed, and so I was using the octatrack with longer pieces, exactly with the modulation. And then I started moving as I learned the EEG better and hacked into it and created my own software for it. I got access to more nuanced data and start creating more and more nuanced ways to take that data and map it to triggering notes or very specific CCs, as many as I want, because I was in the engine, so to speak. And so I've gravitated towards these individual song snapshots, presenting, chatting, you know, not in a techno warehouse situation, but at a conference or a workshop or a presentation like this, where it can be individual ones. And I often do have audience members come up, choose a kit, put it on, and experience it for themselves. So that said, if anyone's interested in choosing a kit and putting it on their brain. Yes.
And to finish on my idea of
please.
talking, I think, you know, your background as a techno musician and here what you do as being experimental, I think it's great to say that there's a reason, like there's a genealogy of EDM and rooted in experimental scene.
Absolutely.
Underground. So I think there's lots of coherence behind that.
Absolutely, yeah. I was in and still perform sometimes in a very experimental electronic scene of the weirder the better. Who would like to go first? Did I see your hand first? Which kit are you interested in of the ones that you heard? Orchestral? All right, let's do that. There we go. What's it like for you?
I think the most interesting thing is noticing the differences on breathing in and breathing out. And how much less control I like kind of think about or that I have over it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you. Great composition.
I have a quick question.
Yes, please.
Maybe, actually, two questions. The first one you might be able to answer. Were you able to control, like, any of these data?
I think what I was getting at is I felt more control when I focused on my breathing. And it's like the breathing in and out made me feel like I was actually moving something, but like trying to do something in my brain had much less of an effect.
Huh. Thanks. My second question, have you tried, well, I'm thinking to use this data as a pre-saved sort of data, like in some other settings, like putting someone into sleep and like saving this data and then see what's gonna happen. Have you done that before?
I've saved little snapshots of rehearsals and use that data, and the way I use it is during performances, like longer performances and high stress situations. Sometimes the EEG just disconnects. It's a Bluetooth device and it loses its connection. So if it loses its connection, it automatically starts playing my rehearsal loop. So it gives it time to reconnect. And since it's my rehearsal loop, it sounds like my brain. So it gives me a 10-15 second window for this to reconnect and start grabbing the live data. If it didn't do that, all the sounds would just stay the same for those 15 seconds, and then when the live data kicks in again, it would start moving again. So I've done that, but I haven't done it with, it's a good idea with sleeping or different activities.
Actually, I'm more curious about that. Like, what can happen, like, through those stages of once someone's going to sleep, you know?
Yep. Were you interested in trying it?
Yeah.
Which kit would you be interested in?
Like those.
The which one?
White noise.
White noise, awesome. That's my favorite. All right, when you take your glasses off and so you put it on kind of like glasses and then like old school headphones, and clicks type. Okay, that's working. All right. You're welcome. One of the things that I do when there's a lot of amplitude to the waves is that I start to average them out. So, when they cross a certain threshold, if they're always past that threshold, I move that threshold. So I'm looking for the part that creates the note activity. Otherwise, that's what triggers the note, is crossing that threshold. And so if a certain brain wave is always below or above that threshold, you wouldn't hear notes because it's not crossing it. And so the thresholds for each frequency band moves up and down to be able to pick up on the activity.
When it comes to the bars, are those, so for each frequency that's represented by a bar, like the output we're getting is like a certain note, is that coming from a static brain frequency, a mean, a range, like what fits into that?
What's the bar?
Yeah.
So electrical data or acoustic data is time-based. So it's a stream of just raw signal coming into, and it's called a fast Fourier transform, and it's used in every EQ. It's actually used in a lot of different technologies, but what it does is it takes a time-based sample, a window of samples, and then it turns it into a frequency analysis. It's a brilliant thing. It was a Frenchman in the 1800s.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Mr. Fourier.
Fourier.
Yeah. He went to Egypt with Napoleon.
Oh, really?
He was a scientist, he was a guest with Napoleon.
Wow. That's awesome. So he had figured out this brilliant formula to take time-based data and turn it into frequency-based data. So when the EEG starts, there's a slight lag because it needs to collect a second or two worth of data to be able to analyze it enough, and then it constantly streams in, just like an audio signal. It's a buffer. And then when you turn it sideways, it's like an X type of formula. It's a grid of information. There's discrete Fourier transform and then fast Fourier transform, which is this very efficient X formula of a grid. And what that does is it gives you amplitude information on as many frequency bins you want to cut on a particular sample, and it's based on the sampling rate. And with this, I'm cutting, I think, 100 or 110 bins. And the bottom ones, you see this here. These bottom ones I'm just not using because at that low frequency, with this particular device, it's just noise. So it's not any sort of brain information that's valuable. So getting up into this frequency, that's the delta waves. And so I think it's one frequency, it's a hertz per bin. And so this is 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. And that's the hertz, or that's the hertz of each bar is one frequency higher and higher. And as you get up into here, I forgot where I cut the chart off. In the middle is, again, with this particular device, is just a lot of noise. It was always pinned to always pinned at a full amplitude, and I think that's Jean-Francois. Have you ever worked with the is it Nyquist number, that N? And it's right in the middle of fast Fourier transform, and it's always just like a crazy value, and then it makes sense below it and above it.
Yeah, maybe that. I don't know. Or is it the sensor, or is it,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I ignore that data because it's just it never changed and wasn't usable. And then so up here you get into the higher frequencies. Gamma can go from like 50 up into whatever, but generally EEGs stop around 100 or 110 hertz. Most of the frequency bands are below the auditory level. So if this is 20, if you translate it directly into sound, these would be super bassy sounds that you'd feel more than hear. And you know, a beta wave in the brain doesn't feel like a sub bass. These more feel like it. So anytime I've done a direct translation, I've had to scale it up a few octaves in order for it to be hearable but with our ears. Did that explain?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Little FFT deep dive in fast Fourier transform. Well, if you have any other questions, feel free to come up after we, close up shop, or I can give you my contact info and reach out to me with any questions, or if you want more information about what this is or my music in general. So, yes,
Can I just
Nick.
ask, that you maybe tell people here about Symphony, maybe, I'm not sure how many people here from Cedar Rapids.
Yeah, let's get a show of hands. Who's from Iowa City? Great. Who's from Cedar Rapids? All right, we're carpooling.
You raised for both, right? Raise your hand.
So we started the Nubo Synth group at CSPS. I think it was February of 2019, February or March, and the idea was to get people who are interested in synthesizers. Doesn't have to be modular. It can be just straight up hardware. I don't have much modular. I've got more hardware synths. And typically we break it into several segments where the first person presents, this was the format we had. We had the first person present just a basic concept of what is a filter, what is a low pass filter, what is an LFO, what is resonance, and just spending some time on a real basic concept. One, for beginners, and then two, for people who are more advanced, to kind of reconsider a concept that they're used to. We had a pretty lively debate on attack, decay, sustain, release. Was sustain a time value or an amplitude? I believe it's an amplitude, but there was a feisty debate about it. Anyways, some of those assume things that, knobs I've been turning for 20 years, and like, oh, I know what this is, and it's like, maybe I don't. And so the basics, first 5 minutes or so is good for that. Then we have kind of a mid-level presentation where maybe someone demos a piece of gear. I saw a really awesome one. I still remember the one about the Zero Coast.
Yeah.
That was awesome, where he just started with a basic patch, and then like 10 minutes later it was like, I'm glad I can make that sound in public here. But, and then the last one can be 20 to 40 minutes of performance and talk about how that performance was made. And essentially that was the format tonight, was just that last section. So we're always looking for people who are interested in doing a basic, like a synth demo or a full, and performance, it doesn't have to be a huge scale. It could just be playing something from the synths that is something you're into, and then just breaking it down so people understand how it was made. I often find that's a really effective way to learn, even if it's just sound by sound. So, is everyone aware of our Facebook group?
I was going to ask, is there any Facebook group that
Yes.
you can?
Facebook and Instagram. But the Facebook is an actual group, so we can all comment and have discussion in there.
How am I not logged in? Oh, I've got this computer back.
Yeah, we had originally done it the first Monday of every month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was monthly.
That seems like a good night for everyone. Let's stick with that.
Is the forum
The forum-
more active?
That's the discussion page.
Yeah, I think this is more active than the actual group.
Linked, so.
Yep. Yeah, so the events are in here. Yeah, just go to Nubo Synth Group Forum, and that's where we'll be posting the events, and whether it's in Cedar Rapids or Iowa City, might be cool just to toggle back and forth to be able to engage more people.
That's the same group that posted this event, right? Okay,
Yep.
sounds good.
Yep. This happening now is literally us right now. This, yeah, that red text is us happening now.
There are two groups like forum and not forum.
Just go to the forum.
Yeah.
It's used more. Yeah. There is.
Oh yeah.
Maybe you have like a page to host events or something.
Oh, that's the
Almost done.
It's the same thing. Yeah, the forum's more active, has more members. It's literally the same group, just different. You know, it's just Facebook. Facebook's confusing.
And we might consider having our city page in itself.
Sure, absolutely.
So just,
Yep.
so people
If you guys grow into it, yeah. But the idea is just engage as many people interested in synthesis as possible so we can learn from each other. Cool. All right, well, thank you, everyone. This is great.
Thanks.